Well, hi. Thank you for checking in here on the BDR Lunch Gathering videos. We're glad you're here. We want to let you know that we have quite a few of these videos. In fact, if you go to the BDR site and check out our page, you'll find that here under News and Lunch Gathering, you'll find not only the fact that these educational web seminars are free, there is no cost whatsoever, but you'll find out what's coming up and a complete listing of all the different ones we've had in the recent past and over the past 2 years and a half. All these are good sources of information that I think you'll enjoy. So we invite you to check in, visit with us, and let us know how you appreciate them. There is a little button in the bottom here. It says subscribe. If you click on that to the little bell, you'll get a weekly reminder when new posts are made. And we, again, thank you for being part of our family.
As I mentioned in the newsletter, we'd like to talk about site security today. Not the cyber security that we talk about most of the time, but site security. And I'd like to make this a group discussion, and I'd like to hear your experiences. I'd like to hear some of the things you found work and some of the things you found don't work. I remember about 20 years ago in Baltimore, one of the guys wrote me and mentioned that he was right across the street from a firehouse, but that firehouse would never open its doors to passersby. The neighborhood was so rotten. And so he had to really keep an eye on his site. And so there's a lot of places. And let's start with fencing. I just got a video from someone a few minutes ago, which I'll show if you'd like to see it, about a transmitter site that does not seem to have a fence around it. And I don't know, it's a time-lapse photography. I don't know the exact length of it yet, and maybe I'll wait until I find out before I show it. But all kinds of people come along, parking, walking across the area around the transmitter building, stopping, unloading a bicycle, and going off on there. So when we talk about fencing, the average, of course, is usually a chain link fence, isn't it? With a gate. And there are two problems with this. And as you can imagine, problem number one is how do you keep people from cutting the fence? And number two, how do you keep people from cutting the lock? One of the problems that you find is that as utilities and other vendors come along, they tend to add locks to the chain. And so you have all these locks sort of interconnected. And that can be a real problem. Worse, of course, all it takes is somebody with a really big cutting tool, and your site is now open. Similarly, don't forget, we have fences around the towers, especially on AM, but a lot of people put tower fences on the FM because of liability issues. You don't want people climbing your tower. So anyone want to share with us the way that they've gone about putting fencing around a site? Do you ever run into issues with management about spending the money to do that? We had one station here that had their ground system stolen 3 times, and management finally said, okay, we'll put the fence up. We hear you. But you can get quotes from 1 or 2 fencing companies. And usually the 6-foot fences are sufficient. I don't know if you need to put that concertina stuff on the top or not. I think it depends on the neighborhood, and it depends what you do. And that will bring us to the question of cameras eventually. But what's your experience with fences? Anyone? Anyone want to share a little bit?
Well, one of the issues we have is that we're on a mountaintop with three Class Cs, and chain link fence lasts 1 year. When the snow gets into the fence and freezes, and when it starts to thaw, it just pulls it right down. So we really don't quite know what to do about that.
Well, that's a good one up on a mountaintop. Would you think wood
Couldn't
would
you,
or
couldn't you fill your fence posts with foam or something?
Oh, the posts stay up just fine. It's the fabric that gets, yanked down. So there's either we need to put in, I don't know. I don't know what, obviously we don't know what the issue is. And then, none of the one entities wants to pay for it. And we have, two commercial stations or two commercial conglomerates, I guess, and one nonprofit. So how do you work that out?
yeah, that's a good point. You need to have cooperation. Everything from RF density to the fence and the locks. Uh, uh, Mark mentions here the gatekeeper. I've seen several versions of this where you have a bar, and each of the locks will go on that bar, and you can open it just by emptying, and it hides the locks from the weather and from casual people. But when you get down to these locks, and I don't want to just jump off of the fence for a moment because you think about the different locations. You can be out on the desert, you can be on a mountaintop, you can be just in a just residential area, and a lot of this has to do with how busy the site is, how much traffic there is in terms of locals. But I'll just mention for the moment that there are at least six or eight, maybe 600 or 800 videos on YouTube on how to pick a lock. I used to try to have one lock key for everything at the site, the door, the gate lock, the ATUs. Made it a lot simpler than carrying 30 or 40 keys for a site. But if they are easily picked or duplicated, now you've got a problem, don't you?
Barry, it's been my opinion that uh, locks and fences keep honest people honest. If somebody wants to get in, they're going to get in. I've got an AM about 5 miles out in the middle of nowhere in the high desert, and somebody has decided that they want to break into that place, and they do it, probably about every 6 months. They go in there, they just kind of trash the place, they might steal the wiring, and just generally make a nuisance of themselves. It looks like they've been living there a few times. My problem is, and things I'm interested in is how we talk about and putting cameras up with motion sensors so that we know when somebody's broken into the place. That's why I'm watching today. This place is so far out in the middle of nowhere that the sheriff won't even go out there. So what do you do about something like that?
Won't even go out there. Wow. What about private security companies?
It would cost a fortune because it's so far away and so hard to get to.
Yeah. Well, any neighbors of any sort out there?
There's nobody around literally for about 3.5 miles. Nothing but high desert.
Do you
Well,
have internet out there?
No, that's one of the things I'm working on is making an agreement with a WISP in order to get good internet out there so I can support cameras. I'm using a Mosley LAN link right now for my STL, and that doesn't have the bandwidth for cameras.
is there cell service on the site?
It's not very good. I would have to put a Yagi up and point it towards the closest cell tower, and then maybe use one of those cell little modem puck things. But uh, that's one of the things I'm also exploring, because I'll be honest, I'm really getting tired of replacing grounds, and I'm really getting tired of replacing AC wiring and air conditioners. They've been stealing the air conditioners of the outside units the last few times.
Yeah, that's always a problem when you find out that there's no AC on top of everything else.
Yeah, when it's 104 in the building, that's a problem.
It is. It is. I did an article with a fellow from the Palm Springs area, generally speaking, some years ago with Radio Guide about gorilla snot as a way to protect the ground wiring. There are several similar things where people have talked about using asphalt, road tar.
Yeah, I read those, and that's what I'm doing now. Is as I'm replacing everything, I'm contaminating it so they won't steal it, or they won't get anything for it if they do steal it.
Well,
Those long-range cellular devices actually work quite good. There used to be a company called Tellular. I don't know if they're still around. And you could put one of those at your sites and point the outdoor little Yagi, and you could get some pretty good broadband telephone connection with those things over miles and miles. I had to do it at several sites where landlines weren't available.
I'm going to have to do something like that, because this is a metal enclosed, completely closed up type building. And in fact, with the doors closed, my cell phone doesn't work inside the building. And I consider that a safety issue if I can't call for help with the doors closed. So I'm going to probably have to put some kind of a cellular repeater in the building so I can call out with the door closed.
Do you have any kind of current cameras or other motion sensing when you're in there?
I had cameras the last time, but the first thing they did was knocked all the cameras out, and so they haven't been replaced yet. That's the next adventure, is replacing cameras and finding a way to have a recorder or something that they won't find. I have an old MW5. If anybody wants it, they can have it. That's been decommissioned, and I was thinking about hiding the NVR down in the bowels of that thing, that maybe they wouldn't look for it down there.
Well, there are definitely ways to do that. I think the one that I saw this morning that somebody had mentioned was putting the camera up about 20 feet on the tower where they wouldn't find it.
Yeah, but how do I feed it? It's their AM tower. So how do I get them across the the series?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Well,
there's
some of those cameras have like 2.8 and 5.4 gig links built on them.
But I guess
And
it would have to be a camera with a solar panel and a battery then, because otherwise I'd have to get power across it. These towers aren't lit, so I don't have any Austin transformers or a tower light choke to get power across these towers.
okay. Anyone have some experience with this that they'd like to share? Just
well, if
pressure.
you've got no isolation between your tower and your building, you basically can't really do anything except an RF link, and that won't handle, getting power to something.
But I have seen some cameras now that are battery operated cameras, battery operated Wi-Fi, and then they have little solar panels on them to charge the battery. Something like that might work. I'm about to try to get the owner to agree to pay for those and see if they'll work.
Well, that definitely would make a difference to have the solar panel there, and you don't need a whole lot because some of these systems, like the Ring system, will operate on batteries for months at a time, depending upon how much video you have. Big problem with most of these cameras that you have are that I get feedback on two problems. Problem number one is that they all seem to have their own environment. You have to have an app that works only for their camera and not some of the others. And
Right.
then the other issue is that if you buy some very good looking cameras like the Wise cameras, you have to keep paying month by month by month in order to get the features where, for instance, have the video saved or to have certain alarms and alerts. Mark, are you having trouble with your microphone?
There we go. 1, 2, 3.
Well,
Yeah, I just had some basic success. I put cheap, game cameras, and I assume those are going to be stolen. They're self-contained. I put them where they can be seen, assigned, and it doesn't say take me, but that's almost what you want. And then I hide the other cameras much better. But the trick is you've got to get at least one or two that'll get a picture of a license plate. Usually law enforcement won't do anything without some identifier. And it's really tricky to get a camera to work looking at an incoming car with headlights. It can be done, but it's not as easy as you would think, and you got to do some testing. I've had pretty good luck with that. And then even if they trash that camera, at least you've got the video. But all this assumes you've got some way to get the video to a central place. I assume if they take the camera, I don't care because I've got the video and that's what I'm after. And I know that they're there, and that can let me get law enforcement involved.
Let me throw this out there then. What do you think about the idea of putting big signs up that say, I'm recording you and you might as well leave now? Is there any kind of deterrent effect, or is that not work?
I've had mixed success with it. I put them up because some people have come up and then left, but a lot of those people are well aware that they've got 30 minutes or more to do what they want to do. They say, well, the sheriff can't get here that fast, so I got 30 minutes to, pull up the copper or do whatever it is I wanted to do.
Exactly. In this case, it's an hour and a half to get out there.
Yeah, so even more so. And they know that when they go there. It took them that long to get there, and they know the next guy can't get there any faster. You've got a tough situation. I've been listening.
They won't let me install remote sensing machine guns, but that was...
Yeah.
Well, you just need the sound effects.
Now that's a thought.
some people put a bull out there and let them graze. Steve,
I am an armed licensed carrier of weapons, but I really don't want to go down that road and shoot somebody. I don't get paid enough to go through all that hassle.
No, and in Nevada, you can't shoot people for protection of property anyway.
Oh,
So,
you're screwed then.
Steve,
At least in Texas, I could shoot them, but there's a difference between could and should.
right.
Steve mentioned he has been using a solar panel powered camera. You want to tell us what the model that is, or he says about $200. It's in the chat screen here. This is solar powered camera, connects to the Wi-Fi in the building, works great, very inexpensive. Take about 5 minutes to install. Can you take your tower down for 5 minutes?
Well, anyhow.
Steve Carter says, I use subscription-based cellular cameras that are hidden. Pictures and video are on the cloud. So the question becomes, whether you hire a security company or you pay for these cameras, maybe that's not such a huge expense when you consider what you can do with them.
I will, I got the floor here. I will mention, I put it in the chat, but you should, if you're interested in how locks don't work very well, you should go look at the Lock Picking Lawyers channel and just browse some of his videos. And if you spend $30 to get a little package of tools, you too can open almost any lock. Uh, it's really scary. I keep that in my car, and I don't know the combination to half the places I go to. I just open those master locks with my tool. I can open it faster than I can dial in the combination.
Well,
It takes very little practice to get to that level.
that's comforting. What about the Medico keys?
Those are a little tougher, but he sells a tool to open those too.
In some places, you have to be very careful with lock picking tools.
Oh yeah, you're a burglar, and it's a chargeable offense
Right.
in some jurisdictions. That's correct. But I'm already carrying a gun, so I already got legal trouble. I mean, I got more to worry about than the lock picks. And I carry bolt cutters, and I have gotten hassled for that too. And I told the guys that it's just so I can get in, because if the lock rusts up and can't be opened with the key, I just cut it and put a new one on. And I showed my stack of new ones.
Dennis, if you look right now in the chat box, Steve has posted, it's a Semua solar security camera, wireless, outdoor. Looks like 500 lumens spotlight, 2 kill of live video, 360-degree full coverage, motion alerts, cloud local storage, two-way talk, color night vision, $79.
That's hard to beat.
That is. You could afford to put 2 of those up, or 3. Okay.
No RF interference with them?
RF interference?
I've only got experience at high-powered FM sites, but I've had good luck with the Ring products as far as they just work and they don't care about all the transmitters. We've got a site with 4 FMs and 3 TVs. The Ring doesn't care. So that's just one data point, but take it for what it's worth.
What was the model there?
I don't have the number here, but it's one of the real common Ring doorbells.
Mm-hmm.
I just use those. And like I said, I don't mount them. I make them relatively easy to steal because I don't care if they disappear. By the time they disappear, they've done their job.
Hmm.
So I don't go all in trying to make them hard to remove. Another lock problem, and I can't find a picture of it, but there's a real common lock that has 5 buttons, and you punch in a 4-digit number on that lock. Those can be defeated by putting a magnet on the side of the enclosure.
Right.
So again, if you're using those somewhere, be aware they're not very secure.
Now, the cameras store everything in the cloud?
Yes, the Ring does.
They can. You can buy them with SD cards, or you can buy them that they'll feed the cloud, especially if you have a Wi-Fi link.
Yeah.
We stuck a camera up at one site some years ago in a bad neighborhood. What we ended up was drilling a hole in the side of the roof there, the wood. What are we talking about? The paneling. Anyway, drilled a hole there, put some chicken wire in there, and put a camera behind it, and it worked just fine. But no matter what you do, whether you go up 20 feet on the tower.
Yeah. The other thing I was telling Barry before, I found with Wi-Fi, if you have open Wi-Fi at a site, people will pull up and use it. And they leave a mess, they litter the site when they do that. So we found they had to I still have Wi-Fi there, but it is way shut down. And it's not open anymore like it used to be. The only thing that it is used for now is for the cameras, and the engineer's cell phones are in the router by the MAC address, and that's it. So somebody coming up doesn't find Wi-Fi anymore. And that's another thing to consider if your site is sort of near civilization. Maybe that's less of a problem these days, but that was about a year ago.
see. Chris says that he uses the Wise brand. They're cheap. Yes, they are. They can be all put together real quick. They've some of the models have floodlights built in or alarms. When they're tripped, they make a lot of noise. Cheaper than Rangel, but you would commit yourself to the Wise environment. You couldn't buy a Wise camera today and then buy a different make tomorrow. I don't know, turning SSID off. The guys that are really adept at that, they find you, even if the SSID is off. You have to really lock it down using the MAC addresses or exclusionary methods, I think. I could be wrong. Larry, what did you end up with on the mountain site there? Did you ever get a fence of any sort or any way to reduce local visitors?
Which Larry are you referring to? Am I the only one on the
Oh,
this week?
maybe I misread it. Oh well. I hate to say it sometimes, but seeing all this stuff is not always easy.
But I will say that in San Francisco, up on Mount San Bruno, that as a result of COVID, they decided to pretty much end automobile access going up to the top of Mount San Bruno. So that cut way down on the amount of visitors that actually make it to the top of the mountain. It's a lovely hike if you show up there. It's a park, and there's a real nice trail that gives you a good view of the ocean on one side and the San Francisco Bay coming down on the other side. But I believe security has not been an issue up on Mount San Bruno for quite a while.
Okay, I appreciate that. Any other thoughts about locks and cameras? See what else we can share. I'm looking for the email, Mark, that you sent me yesterday, and it's not coming up immediately. Maybe that's my mistake.
Emu has these Wi-Fi cameras. They also will hardwire in. They only had them for $38. You can put an SD card in it, and you can also subscribe to their cloud service as well. But I found it's good just to have the SD card in there, and it does have the two-way audio, and that's also nice too because I leave one of the monitors, the speakers up, so that I can just go into the app and hear the audio as well. Now, to talk to the person if there is somebody in there, because it is motion sensitive as well, and I'll get an alert on that. But to try to talk to them, I would say that's one of the failings of it. It has the ability, but it's with all the noise in the transmitter rooms with the fans and so forth, it doesn't do a very good job with the two-way communication that way. But they are working though, and I've got them in two sites that are doing very well.
We're sort of flipping back and forth between cameras and locks, but yeah, that's the point. I mean, Mark, you told me that you have what, 4, 5 cameras that you're looking at right now, that you can see the whole site or you can see inside.
I'm trying to remember. I think there's three or 4, depending. I mean, that's enough to get the yard and get
Now, you've made a very important point here in the material you sent me earlier. Clean up and remove things from sites. Don't provide a place for folks to hide or conceal themselves.
Yep. Well, that's more in the site kind of site where robbery might be an issue. Make it a big open space where nobody can hide. You know, but also you don't want to leave stuff that would tempt them. If they see, a stack of 2x4s, they might go, "Oh, I could use that." So you can't leave stuff outside. It'll tempt somebody to get in and get it, and they'll do more damage getting in than they will. They'll steal $5 worth of stuff and cause $200 worth of damage, or something like that.
What about
drives me crazy?
What about brush that grows up or trees that grow up around the building or the tower?
Yeah, I don't let them grow up. I apply chemistry. Everybody does it a little different. And the right chemistry can also stop some rodents from incurring. And that's another trick.
You got a suggestion of what to look for?
Well, I use the bad stuff. So, I put on gloves and a mask and use Roundup.
Okay.
But I'm very, very aware of the bad effects of Roundup, so you got to be very careful with it.
Well, a lot more careful than many people had been.
Yeah, you can't just spray it out of the sprayer with no protection. I wear a fully, a full respirator when I do that.
Has anybody tried using a speaker with a let's say an old cart machine with a dog barking?
Or the shotguns going off.
Well, I have at one side I have genuine rifle sound. I don't like that. There's a guy that likes to shoot at the beacon lights, and he usually misses and damages the feed line. So you can't win.
Obviously, there's a wide range of different situations, and sometimes you can put fencing right around the building, around the property, and other times it's almost impossible.
Years ago, when they put 102.5, when they built that tower out in Verna, they built a 1,700-foot tower right in the middle of the different ranches. The problem came in is when as they were getting the beacon shot out as well, and the reason why is because the red lights were disturbing the cows.
Cows and birds.
I know it's not on topic here, but just a real short story. I had a bird. What do you call those guys? There's a certain name of people that study birds. There's levels of experts. One of those guys and a gal studied how many birds were going to die in a tower with red lights that I was responsible for. And I said, I want to hear about this. So I'd get a report where they'd go in, and their original report from the people was there were going to be 8,000 dead birds a month. And I thought to myself, now if I see 8,000 dead birds on the ground, that's a couple thousand a week. I ought to be able to see that without too much trouble. In the year of their study, they found 3 dead birds, and they couldn't prove that the red lights caused the dead birds. Well, so there's a big difference between the expectation and the reality. And again, that's just one data point, but take it for what it's worth.
Yeah, it's a point of debate, isn't it? That red lights, strobes, glass. I saw a news report the other day. I think it was on one of the international channels where they now have some rules in certain cities that a glass cannot be reflective to the outside. In other words, a bird can't see itself.
I'm not surprised.
Well, didn't they just pass a law a few years back that you have to make your side markers flash too to prevent some bird from flying into it or some crap?
Well, the other thing they will do very easily is it's just a fill out a form thing. If you have red lights, you can change to 2 intensity white lights. It's just a fill out a form and tell them what you're going to do. There's no yes or no. They want you to do it. How the FAA's thing, they want to eliminate. Their goal is to eliminate red lights. So if you put in 2 intensity flashers, you can do that if you want.
Seems to me that I recall the thing about them going to all lights flashing rather than some steady burning, because I guess they did find a study that said it's the steady lights that actually kind of attract them, and the flashing lights don't.
And they got that from some deal that was written like in 1912. There was a group that said, oh, it's attracting birds. And I don't know how many towers there were in 1912, radio towers, but I guess they had smokestacks. But I don't know why they'd have red lights on them, because planes weren't that popular. So I don't know.
The most dead birds I've seen at the bottom of a tower was in a city where they put a church's chicken at the bottom.
At the Irwindale site, I did find one hawk dead once over a period of, I don't know how many years. Based on where he was, I think he probably hit the guy wire, which was just, unfortunate, and probably no way to protect that.
Didn't the FAA and the FCC agree that you can just quit running your constant on side lights if you tell them? Seems to me that happened years ago as a result of this study. That's why we turned ours off.
You do have to tell them, but yes, I believe that's correct.
So what's this deal with making all lights flashing? Just turn the side lights off and tell them. Why would you not do that?
I think the FAA was in the process of writing the rules so that future installations, they all have to flash. I suppose, you would opt for that at any time if that's in the rules.
I believe they wanted all the lights to flash because it was confusing to pilots if some of the tower lights were on and some of the tower lights were flashing, especially if they could see more than one tower in their field of view.
This is Grady talking. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Great. On my phone today because my computer has decided it just can't deal with sound and stuff for my Adobe Audition and deal with Zoom and other things. So there you go. I haven't fixed it yet. I'm in the interesting position of having had an FM radio station on an NDB tower on Nantucket, which was owned by the FAA. And it was a very interesting situation because long before they had the ruling about, beacons flashing and side lights solid, that whole tower was flashing. And I thought, that's really weird. And then they did change the ruling so that all you have to do is file with the FCC and the FAA to convert your tower to all lights flashing, and they will approve it. The problem is they also apparently, around that time, it appears that they changed the levels of lights depending on the height of the tower. It's very interesting. It turns out that I have a tower on the north side of Austin that it appears that I don't need 2 levels of flashing side lights anymore. I only need 1. So everything's in a constant state of change with those folks.
A side note of interest, I noticed when I was in Europe that the pattern is the opposite in some of those places where the top beacons and the big ones are steady and the side lights flash. So, whatever.
Well, that brings us a little bit back to site security. What about the road to drive into a site? Have you ever come to a site where you need more than a four-wheel drive, and even then you're not sure you're going to make it? What do you do?
Don't go.
Well, there's a couple of questions that come up here. One is, if it's an AM site, you really can't bring a blade in and just flatten it immediately, can you? But you can dump crushed rock. Now you have to get some budget for that, though.
Industrial communication in the Boston, New England area has another 700-foot tower in the southern suburbs of Boston in North Quincy. And my UMass Boston's main transmitter site for the Boston Metro is 500 feet up that tower. Getting into that site, ever since I moved to that site, has been a almost constant thrash, because the road that goes to the base of the tower goes downhill at a fairly steep angle, and the water wants to cross right over it. And apparently they haven't figured out how to put a culvert underneath there. They just kept twice a year sending somebody with a machine over there to put some rocks and dirt on it and grade it again. And within a month, it's already got a rut that you have a hard time getting through. But the reason this site is important for this particular portion of this conversation is the entire site is in fact fenced, and there is an automatic gate with a card reader at the entrance. And when that card reader goes down, there's no way to get into the site without manually trying to open the gate. And if they haven't figured out that this is the situation, you can't get in. Another problem that has occurred there is that if you want to get into the site and the weather and the snow is so bad that you can't drive down the hill to get to that gate and go in, and you're afraid that you wouldn't be able to get back out that steep grade with the snow and ice on it, you can't get in. You can get in with your card. But on the inside, the only way to get out is to drive a metal vehicle over a sensor in the dirt, and that opens the gate. So if you go in there, you're stuck till somebody comes to save you.
Just try to get up Mount Washington in the winter.
Well,
Great.
since you chimed in, what about Mount San Antonio with 91X? Trying to get up that one before they pave the road.
The little transmitter site for the Native American tribe out here, they won't let anybody else. Really, they don't like anybody to drive up there unless they have a really rugged vehicle. I remember earlier this year I was up there, and we discovered that the Border Patrol had broken an axle on the road. Not a whole lot. One of the things we haven't really discussed is the issue of signage. Now, we talked about last week or the week before having the antenna ASR number posted on the fence or on the gate leading to a site. There's a lot of vandalism in Las Vegas, and our dear friend who's passed away, David Stewart, came up with this solution. And all the vandalism stopped. Another solution would be to, especially if you're in a neighborhood where there are other homes, it used to be take albums and CDs over to some of the homeowners, and they would gratefully call you if someone was there on the site. But the biggest problem, as Dennis mentions, is those places that are truly isolated, because you're not going to get police response in any kind of speed, nor can you get out there in any kind of speed. And generally the bad guys know that, and they will take what they want and leave before you can get there. If you're in town, it's another matter.
Well, for $5,000, I'd report myself.
Okay, Rich. Where would you like us to report you? I know, on the Brooklyn Bridge. Never mind.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I just drove out to a site to restart a transmitter last night, and it's somewhat isolated, but it's 15 miles each way from where I live here in town. Time you get there, there's no neighbors, no anything. It's pretty bad. Fortunately, all I had to do was push the go button. For some reason, the Continental didn't like the power interruption.
Well, we've heard from about a half dozen folks. Anybody else would like to share their experience with cameras or gates and locks? I think one of the things that often doesn't get enough attention is the tower fence, which very often was wooden and is falling apart. That can bring you an NOV or worse, a citation, or worse than that, somebody could get in there and burn themselves on the tower. And it has happened.
Well, Barry, I'll be glad to tell you about a little bit of what I ran into in dealing with KBLA here in Los Angeles that I retired from recently. Let's see, I never had anybody cut a lock. That they never did. But I did have them one time bring a very good, very nice tool that I had never seen before, designed for cutting chain link fence. And they cut a slot in the chain link fence and came in the property. But the silly guys left their tool there. So I picked up the tool, said, this is a nice tool. I put it inside the building and locked it away so they wouldn't be able to have that tool to use it again. That was for a perimeter fence. Then around each of the towers, there's a wrought iron fence that goes up vertically. And then the top part of it, I think it tilts out, as I remember. Maybe it tilts in, I forget, which makes it difficult to climb. But the security cameras one time did show a guy who probably was on drugs, because he was certainly a lot stronger than I am, the way he just kind of grabbed a hold of that fence and flipped himself over it. And then he got a hold of the door of the Kentronics matching network cabinet and just with brute force ripped that door open despite it being locked. And then he went in and played with the controls in there and totally messed up the tuning in on the network. But I think he stopped when he probably got an RF burn. I hope he got a good one to serve him right. So that was one. Then I had another one where somebody came in through the perimeter fence somewhere, and decided they wanted to take the copper water pipe that fed water to the building, which was I think it was a 2-inch pipe, as I recall. So there was a fair amount of copper there. And they started hacksawing through it until the pressurized water came out and hit them. And then they left it, but left a fountain out by the building there from that activity. And down at KFI, in my KFI days, had it where had base jumpers climb the tower and jump off the tower. And the way they did that, they had a big 2 by 12, I think it was, piece of wood. And they put that on top of the tuning house and put it onto the tower. So they had an insulated platform to walk across and then grab a hold of the tower and climb the tower and go up to the top and parachute back down. So I've had my share of various activities, and I've never found anything that was totally effective. It seems like they do stuff despite the cameras being there. And it was, I have to admit, it was a bit of a factor in my decision to finally retire after 68 years in broadcasting, because I didn't want to be dealing with the vandalism anymore.
I think one of the stories that I like to tell, I didn't see it myself, but goes along to what you were just commenting on. One of the engineers of a 50 kilowatt rig in the East told me the story at NAB one year. They went out to inspect the tower fence because the gate was open. They wanted to find out what's going on. And they went in there and discovered that the bottom ball, the arc ball gap, the bottom ball was missing. And they're looking around to see what's going on here. And then they looked a little closer, and on the top ball was very clearly the outline of a hand. And he said, well, you know, that was sort of the thing where he figured he got just punishment already.
That's why I felt also. I didn't see any evidence of the fellow getting an RF burn, but putting his hands in that tuning cabinet the way he did, he must have. So, same thing.
Okay, Dennis, you and I had a similar thought here, and he had an FM transmitter in a pasture with a bull in the pasture. Was it by chance this one? Well,
That's not a bull, Barry. There are no horns. The bull that I had, he had big enough horns that you were worried about him, and you knew where he was when you tried to get from your truck to the building.
well, all you had to do was have somebody that you could run faster than.
And then the cows used to scratch their backs on the guy wires. That created its own set of problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. They could knock a guy wire out, or I've seen guy anchors pulled up. But then again, you have sites where they put the little tiny fences and poles around the tower, and an off-road vehicle comes along and takes them down.
I've got to run, but I'm looking at poweroutage.us, which is a good site. And it's gone from like 28K this morning to 98K. The customers out in Florida, and that's probably going to go way up. So watch out if you know somebody in Florida. I got to get going. See you later.
Well, we certainly appreciate your spending some time with us and sharing some of the thoughts that help us secure the site a little bit better. So now we know that it's not a fence, it's not a lock. Cameras are helpful, but you got to be sure where you put them and how you manage them. The
Well, I have
building.
another gate-related story. This is against Mount San Bruno, which has an automatic gate that opens up when you leave the site on the way out. And if you're lucky, you've got an opener that will open the gate to get in. There was a power outage. I think it must have been about 11 o'clock at night. And a generator was running, but I went up there anyway, just to make sure that everything was going smoothly. I get there and there's somebody who's stuck on the inside because their car cannot operate the gate then when it has no power. So I opened the alternate gate, which has a couple of padlocks on it with combinations. And the guy zooms out of the gate in a hurry and he runs off. And a few minutes later, the local sheriff's department person shows up and says, I got a call from someone that says there's an emergency on Mount San Bruno. And I said, well, there was somebody who was trapped behind the locked gate. So maybe they were calling, hoping that somebody could get them out. And what ended up happening was the sheriff said, well, I really have to investigate. So can you take me up the hill and show me all of the buildings and we'll see if anybody else is possibly in a bad situation. So I ended up spending half hour, 45 minutes going to all of the buildings on Mount San Bruno with the sheriff's guy. There's no other automobiles up there. So he finally concluded that the guy who was trapped behind the gate must have been the one that called 911, and he never hung around to let me know who he was. Like I said, I tried to talk to the guy, and he just kept his door closed and took off like a shot.
I like the bull idea. I put the XTRA format on a station in Bountiful, Utah, just outside Salt Lake City. And the entire station was in a concrete bunker in the middle of a cow pasture. And it was in a bunker because the owner was Catholic in Mormon territory, and he was terribly paranoid that the Mormons were going to come after him. So I'm surprised he didn't have some bulls in there.
Well, of course, as I said, there's always a liability issue too, that if you make it too easy for someone to get hurt, they will.
Harry, I just happened to think of something here. I'll show you. I bought this device because of where I live. We have bears now. So when my wife and I go for a walk, I always take this along with me. But I originally bought it thinking it would be good to deter dogs that come charging out at you, which we don't have much problem with here. But that when somebody mentioned about the bull and how worrying about that, I thought, I think I have the perfect tool for it. And maybe I can demonstrate it here. Let's see if there it is now. I think I got it in the picture. Very effective. I've had this scare the heck out of dogs and scare the heck out of the bears that come in the backyard. So I always take it with me when we go for a walk.
One of the things that Mark had mentioned about securing your site, and we really haven't gotten to the building itself very much in terms of locks on the building or even the ability to get in and out of it. Certainly windows are not necessarily a good thing, but if you don't have a camera, it can be a little nerve-wracking to wonder if you open the door what you might find. But he also made the point that when you have anything out there, whether it be gas or a generator, anything that's got a fuel cap on it, for instance, you don't want to allow invaders to pour things in there and to disable your generator. Any other thoughts about site security? Any experiences you've had? I think it's really good when we can share our thoughts on that level, because, as I said before, and you could see from the different commenters, you could be on a mountaintop or out in the middle of the desert or upper desert in the middle of a neighborhood. There's no one answer, is there? Look what happened at the golf course there in Florida last week. Now you could get into that whole business about why they didn't see it earlier, but the fact is that that little cubby hole in the fence was known about for years because paparazzi used it. And, you have to have a budget. You have to go back and you have to repair these fences or the screens or whatever it is, and it can become a real problem. Now, some stations use insurance as a means of moderating the costs of that. They'll spend the money on the insurance, and when the vandals come in, well, the insurance company will pick up much of the tab, depending upon your deductible. But just because it's not attached to the studio building, just because the GM doesn't see it on a regular basis, doesn't mean it does not have to be cared for.
Barry, a station that we purchased up in East Tampa. It's interesting that the site wasn't very much cared for as far as that goes. and so it needed a lot of landscaping and so forth done. And one of the things that I found was that there was a wetlands, a couple acres of wetlands, and so when you looked at that, and there was rumors that there was an alligator in the swamps. So that could be kind of a deterrent, because I noticed in that section of it, there was no fence to speak of, but you really couldn't see it unless you really took a hard walk around the property, because most of it had trees and overgrowth and so forth, which added as a kind of a barrier anyway. So you'd have to cut down a lot of the brush in order to get into that part of the property. I mean, somebody wants to do some damage. I mean, they have to be trying to, and just as the blocks only keep honest people honest. The answer, the reason that people climb a tower or a mountain is the same, because it's there. So.
Well, the stations that I've worked for couldn't use insurance for protection, because any time off the air costs a fortune. You
Well,
want to get it taken care of right away.
That's where the owner manager has to pay attention. Here's the picture from Clay's thing that he showed me. See if I can make that. This is the lock box thing that they had on that gate, and where his hand is here, if you look underneath, you end up with that. Now, again, as several people have mentioned, it's getting pretty easy to pick these locks. There's enough tools out there. And even the combo locks, he says. I wanted to have Mark talk about that, but he had to leave. In his note to me, he said these 4-digit combo locks can be broken pretty easily. But you can see by the way they're mounted here, it'd be really hard to get one of those bolt cutters in there.
I can speak to the ease of picking those locks. I saw the same article several years ago, and I had seen those at every site that I go to. I was using those locks on a location in South Central Connecticut that was a pretty serious place that I needed to keep secure because of the way we got that license. And then other people decided they wanted to try to hurt us. And I went down there, and with a nail file, I was able to get into there in about 20 seconds. Fortunately, I had 2 old Medico padlocks from the 1510 transmitter site that I built when I first came to Boston in 1980 for the old WMEX, which became Interesting Story, WITS, Information, Talk, and Sports. But those of us who worked on the inside knew that WITS really stood for, what is this stuff? Except there was a different word for the S. Anyway, I took 2 of those old Medico padlocks down there, for which I still had 4 of the original keys that we cut in 1981, when we changed the padlocks there from the ones that we put on the place temporarily when we built it. And those padlocks still work great. And I don't know what to say. Yes, there's probably a way to pick it, but I would say that that's one of the more seriously secure kinds of locks that you can put in. I don't have a way to keep bolt cutters off of them yet. But at this point, because this site is on a farm, and the people who own the farm are very friendly with us, and it's literally right across the street from their house, on a little side road that is on the farm, we don't fear that much activity there, because they can literally see the front door of this little container. This World War II explosives magazine is what I've got the transmitter site built in. They can see it out the windows of their house. So there you go.
Well, it's really a shame that the station in Jasper, Alabama didn't have all this security, or that tower never would have been stolen.
Just waiting for you to bring that up. But yeah, again, one of the issues here is identifying the best you can do in a given situation. And sometimes, yeah, it's going to be a cellular hookup, like Ken mentioned, pointing to a tower that could be several miles away, but it gets you there. I'm not sure the Starlink is the answer, although I know several stations have started to use the Starlink system, because that is a way that they can remain connected at all times, and something that intruders are not going to be able to break into. But I think in this day and age, not having security at the transmitter site is probably not a smart thing. It may be difficult. You may be in a bad neighborhood, but it's time to check your fences, check your gates, check your locks, check your building. And of all things, get more cameras. Now, I've had 3 or 4 people post to the broadcast list today and yesterday cameras that they've found to be good. Some of them are agnostic in terms of application, and you could use them with different makes of camera. I have a box full of cameras that some of them I can use, some of them I can't use. Some of them I got when we were still on Windows 7, XP 7, 8, and they don't work now with the 10 or 11. That's another problem. A couple of really good companies that made pretty good cameras, but they chose not to update the drivers. And so you have to be a little careful about that. So I like the idea of finding an agnostic application that will run different ones and mate them with cameras that'll work.